Hello, my name is Lorenzo Davis and I am from Seattle, Washington. I'm 35 years old. 7 years ago, it marked the course of history whereby the theories that determine psychology and the basis of rationality and opportunity faces the judgment of understanding of the basis of knowledge, and whereby studious and events of the realities of making knowledge in the course of remaking history to state the status of society as a social basis of law and the natural consent and demand, which courses the faces of relativity and the relative notion of the nature and states of the ideas and identities within these ideas, within ideas that determine its worth and value as carried as probative quality. Determinative factor in the syllogistic logic of reasoning is the determining factor that merits worth and truth more broadly in the definition of essentialism and the nature of quality that realizes itself as the opportunity that gives pleasure in its weight to a democratic system of government. The story goes on to well address the opportunity of a majority theme and the true nature of its minority factor. The true basis of his reasoning is a Maslow's critique, and this critique is the reasoning nature of a rational case. In the cases of insanity, the fact remains the same of intent that mens rea has to be criminal. It has to be the subject. It has to be the matter of the jurisdiction in which jurisprudence rests. No lies notion, no carries no burden to outweigh a law of no ignorance, to excuse his knowledge of being all knowing, to the faith in which it becomes. The hope in which it dwells lies within, the carried away in stupidity, the unwelcome wisdom of nature, and calls for justice to cry no more. So the theory thoughts of logic and silent voices of truth is a noticeable theory in the masters that articulate this dogma. So the theory goes on, and the well-addressed history records to the impartments of antiquity and the knowledge of generational legacy and the knowledge that carries away its burden to Supreme Court in the cases of legislative dictation and the stories of articulation and the stories in which we dwell to the debates in which we dialogue and which we record in the recorded briefs in which we brief cases that take part in the relevancy of its own reality of self to the digna of societal states that determine its variability. So the statistical probability determines its own weight. So the truth of its own validity is matter that gravity can pull it down. So why not question its imagination? Why not rebirth the truth in its own story to see the veracity of the realities of the elements in which creative power can define its identity in the themes that identify its nature to welcome its state as an alien that admits itself to treaty and the treatise of reasoning as we know it in the duties in which care to not be negligent in the tortuous realities of claims which partake our environment as productions in which we produce the imagery and imaginations of realities and courses of itself to partake in the truth and wisdom of the truth of the realities that dignify itself in the courses of the judgment that faces its nobility more so in the digna of the opportunity that dictates the predetermined staircases of law that classifies the foundation in which all faith must be based upon the solution of a creative solution to go ahead and tell the story correctly to a society that needs it the most. So Maslow's theory cannot stand on the basis of rational reasoning, for reason will fall apart when the story cannot rewrite itself. It cannot classify law to be procedural without the process of its constitution, the status nature of the element in which it identifies its identity to be the validity of the fact of the document that carries the discovery to inform the charges of its nature to the element of the causes of an act. That causation is the fact and the solution of the research engaged and enjoins to engage the engendering tone and the element of linguistically styling and comparing the compatterns of the mobility and the solution of tones and tonal realities and the articulations of harmony that balances itself to be truth and justice as a matter of fact, new to the remaking of law that classifies its own validity and the self-esteem that actualizes its power to a state of need as an asset that carries worth that people find potential in to base their psychology on the predictions that limit notions and the dogmas that domains carry truth but not carry it over into what other realms of reality cannot see and the realities of love that cannot dwell in anything silent leaving itself to the own realities that demand itself to move in clearer realities that cannot give away its fruit, to go ahead and buff itself up, to classify itself as a paltry and needs more health, to breathe more weight and carry more probative reality, and to the solution of an instruction that dictates itself and not judge its own merits and quality in reference to the predictions of its research, to the basis of how we base research, and the true fact that nobles the reality to only see the reality that it is. And this reality of the case, we can only define it as such. So my reality 7 years later can only say that the theory of Maslow's hierarchy is not the forefront of the reasoning theories and themes that address its conclusion to the facts, and the fact that cases are statements, and statements are relative to the notions in which the identities and the cultures in which evolved to the evolutions of fact that notes is noteworthy to be noble and to be notable in all cases that note itself as note taking as the worthy honor dictates itself as worth and virtue as assets to assess its assessment in only the cases in which the analysis is warranted. So truth in that reality can say that practical reality is a probable solution to the victory that we have to chase, but not actually grab into the reality of the hands that we create, that is, determine the truth of its value. And that value is the quality of two realities that conflict, but then consent to the nature of itself.